All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Today's date is April 1st, 2022. This is a special meeting of the members of the State Liquor Authority being conducted in Albany and remotely via WebEx. This is also being live streamed on the Authority's YouTube channel. Present today is Chairman Bradley in the Albany office, Commissioners Fan and Ford, who are participating remotely via WebEx, staff who are also participating is General Counsel Meyerhoff remotely via WebEx, Deputy Commissioner of Licensing Donahue, and myself, Secretary to the Authority Roper in the Albany office. We have one item on today's calendar. It's a request for summary suspension from Counsel's office. The agenda number is 652C, serial number 1317870, LONDEL Davis LLC, DBA L Lounge. Counsel's office whenever you're ready.
Margarita Marsico on behalf of Counsel's office. Good afternoon, members. Counsel's office before you requesting that you order an emergency order of summary suspension as to Londell Davis LLC doing business as L Bar and Lounge, which is located at 2131 8th Avenue. Also known as Frederick Douglass Boulevard, within the confines of the 28th Precinct. The reason we're making this request is because there have been a series of violent incidents involving violence and gunfire, the most recent of which was on March 18th. There was a shot fired by a person who the detectives believe was a patron who left the premise. And when the police attempted to investigate this incident and did a follow-up investigation, the licensee's agents were not cooperative, and I'll explain in more detail as I tell you more of the facts. That's reason number one. Also, the SLA knows that a person that appears to be an apparent availer of the licensee also has been non-cooperative with law enforcement and was in fact arrested for failing to permit inspection. He was given a desk appearance ticket. That was on March 19th, the day after of the shots fired incident. The licensee hires security that are unlicensed. In fact, from the police, they tell us that when the police did an inspection on March 19th, they discovered an individual who was performing the acts of a security guard, and it turns out that he is a convicted felon. Based on the absence of the licensee principal, he does not appear to be there when the officers who are most responsible for visiting seem to go. I spoke to NCO Sergeant Vega, and he told me he made 4 visits to the licensed premise, and the licensee principal was never there. And that's important because the licensee principal appears to have experience. He's had 4 licenses in the past. He has an active license as well, aside from this one. He has no adverse history before this, which is why the SLA is concerned about what exactly is going on here, because this licensee previously had no history. So as I hope you were able to see in the documents I sent over to you, we did give the licensee a warning about numerous noise complaints that we were receiving. This license was only issued on January 31st of 2020. So this licensee has not been in operation all that long. Since they started operating, they were getting a stream of 311. They were generating a stream of 311 calls from local residents. We sent the licensee a notice regarding that. The 311 calls continued. And the first major incident that was brought to our attention by the police, again, was this stabbing incident on January 13th of 2022. The victim, apparently the police were called to the hospital hours after the incident, and the 911 calls do not reflect that the licensee contacted the police with regard to this incident. I don't know if they're going to say they were unaware that their unlicensed security guard stabbed somebody in the thigh, but there was no report from the licensee So that's concerning. And also the fact that they're using unlicensed security guards. I have been unable to confirm whether this unlicensed security guard is also a felon. You may have noticed in the reports that there is mention of the fact that this individual appears to have had some interactions with law enforcement. I do not know if he's a felon, but I do know that he's unlicensed, and it does appear that they never reported this incident to the police. Then on February 18th, there were shots fired as a result of a group that were standing in front of the licensed premise, believed to be patrons. There was a dispute and shots rang out. I was unable to speak directly to the assigned detective, but I did speak to a detective that works closely with her. And it's my information that when the detective attempted to investigate the shots fired, she was told by the licensee that they needed to serve a subpoena in order to get the video. So the detective did not get the video with regard to that incident, and I believe that shooting incident is still unsolved. Then on March 18th, there was this other shots fired incident. The detectives did go that night. Detective Siciliano went to the licensed premise. The licensee principal was there this time, Mr. David, and he did provide the video to the detectives. It was a little bit of a strange encounter because the detectives said that the downloading was going to take some time. They were going to step out to do some other things and come back. And when they came back, the licensee was closing the doors. So they had to make some phone calls to ensure that they actually secured that videotape on March 18th. The next day, as is the police standard practice, the police went to do a follow-up business inspection, and Mr. Ronald Williams, he's the person that we suspect is an availer, was present. He refused an inspection by the police, and that is when the NCO Sergeant Vega also observed a male performing the acts of a security guard. He pretended to not be a security guard, but the police made the determination that he was a security guard, and he was issued a summons. He was unlicensed. And he's the one, I'm sorry, that was, again, the police tell us is a convicted felon. So then we have March 24th, where we have an inspection by investigator Stravali, who videotaped this inspection. He was given some information that made him question who was actually running the premise. He spoke to a female who said she was a manager. Eventually, Ronald Williams, a suspected availer, appeared. He refused to provide the investigator any identification, even though it was requested of him. The licensee did not have records of alcohol sales. They were selling hookah without a permit. There was a DJ present. They're using the female manager admitted to the investigator that they're using promoters. Finally, the licensee principal showed up after some time, and that is when investigator Stravali asked him if he could please have Mr. Williams show his ID, and Mr. Williams did. It's important to state that on this video, the female manager to investigator Stravali identified Ronald Williams as a half owner of the licensed premise. And again, the NCO sergeant says the only person he's ever seen there is the female manager and Mr. Williams, who's always nearby the vicinity. It does appear that he lives nearby the licensed premise. So there's a clear question about who's actually running this licensed premise. Investigator Jaworski did a social media search. The licensees definitely promoted themselves as having DJs. There's mention of dancing, karaoke, live music, and they also promote hookah. They're not authorized to do any of these things. So this might be leading to the violence as well, that they're not operating, as a small tavern with recorded music, with the principal managing, again, an experienced principal. That's not how they're operating now, and that's why we're concerned. The police say that they're constantly having to monitor this premise. They've had to devote a lot of NCO time, sector police, midnight police officer time. They're constantly responding for the 311 calls as well. And, I spoke to a detective today who was with Detective Siciliano, and He's a veteran detective. He said to him, it appeared that the licensee is just playing games with, the videos, with not being there, being there. And they're not comfortable that they're being fully cooperative. I would note that with regard to the January 13th stabbing incident by the unlicensed security guard, the detectives were able to solve that crime. They made an arrest. So it is not clear what the level of cooperation was on that, but they were able to make an arrest. I've been unable to contact one of the detectives, but it appears that somehow they were able to make that. So it may be that the licensee cooperated, but it seems as if the more and more things that happen with this wave of violence, the more skittish they are about contacting the police or being fully cooperative, probably because they know that their license is going to be in jeopardy. So, based on all these facts, we think that this licensee presents an imminent threat to the public's safety. And I don't know what's happened to the licensee principal because, again, he's had a clean history up until now, but it appears that other people are not supervising. Whoever's in charge, the managers or whoever is put there, are not doing adequate job of supervising the premise. So for these reasons, we're requesting that you summarily suspend.
Yes, thanks, Margarita. This is just a version of what Margarita just said, but this place has been essentially operating outside its methods since it was licensed, causing noise, 911 calls, 311 calls, focal point for police attention. Problem enough, but it has more recently turned to violence and gunfire. And when the police and our investigator went there to see if this was a continuing threat based on violence and gunfire, hoping to get some comfort from the licensed principal who got this license to manage this place itself, they found a nightclub and a veiler and someone looking to duck away and not cooperate. And that creates the kind of risk that we think a suspension would be appropriate to put in place to avoid.
And I would also note, I'm sorry, Gary, I also wanted to add that with regard to the inspection that the investigator did, the licensee's agents refused to permit him to inspect a room that it turned out was full of hookah. So this pattern of not cooperating, and the most recent contact they had with the SLA or law enforcement, they were again hiding what clearly they know is not legal. So it appears that they are just on a bad path, and it's just getting worse and worse.
Margarita, this is Lily Fan. What's the other establishment? What's the other active license for this same licensee?
Okay, hold on one moment. And I have it here. This premise is located at 2628th Avenue. It's LONDEL's Inc. License serial number 1027679. And that license expires December 31st of 22.
Is that close to here, roughly?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a restaurant? Or that's also a bar tavern?
I believe it's a bar tavern. I could confirm that.
And this person who is in theory a failure, based on these facts, has no other active license, or do we not know that?
You know what? I did not check. I can check right now. I just put the name in as a licensee principal, and there were no matches.
Okay. And the stabbing patient, do we have an idea of the seriousness of the injury for the patient?
I believe he was treated in the hospital and released.
And the shots fired, there were no victims. There were just shots fired. Both.
Correct. Yes, I saw the video, and the patrons out in front were all ducking, and there were shots that rang out, but nobody was hit.
Okay.
And I would just note that this is there's a residential building, directly above the licensed premise, and there's residential buildings in that nearby vicinity. Even though it's a commercial street, there are residences there.
This place is not far from our office in New York City, correct?
Correct.
Margarita, since this place was obviously a problem right from the moment it opened, did we not get any referrals from the police department prior to this stuff?
I don't believe we got any referrals prior to this, Chairman.
Do we know why?
I don't know.
Because it's apparent they were there at least multiple times a week.
Yes. I know that we got 311 complaints directly made to us, which is why Investigator Pardo sent a warning letter. I do not know what happened. I remember I had a discussion with Investigator Stravali. We don't know exactly if there was some issue with Vice or what happened, why we didn't get any of these referrals sooner.
Can you ask him to just, for my benefit, just to look into that further in a general sense?
Yes.
Whether there were changes in that precinct or something?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, it's certainly of some concern that both of these shootings happened before midnight. So, that's, it's not even outside of the, norm or normal time, or I don't know how to frame that, but you know what I'm trying to say. This is still dinner time and shootings are happening.
I also did want to note that Investigator Stravali did tell me that he was approached by the licensee principal at a nightlife meeting, I think two nights ago. And he did give Investigator Stravali a copy of the signature card from the bank, which showed that he was the sole signatory. But in terms of control, the information we have is it appears that it's Mr. Williams who's always there, and he was again the one that was identified by the manager as a 50% owner, and Mr. Williams also has identified himself as an owner to police officers in the past as well. So he's holding himself out to the public as an owner.
And we know for sure we don't have a personal questionnaire showing him as a manager or anything like that. He's not affiliated as far as we know.
No, the licensee principal, probably because he has a lot of experience also, I'm sure there was a factor. He said he was going to personally supervise his premise. He was going to manage it.
Okay.
He didn't even ask for a manager here. There are managers there that presumably work under Mr. Williams. And the named principal, I think, already realizes he's got a problem here, and that's why he's banding around his bank records to show that maybe he orders the liquor. I don't know. But the concern is that he's not managing it himself as he represented, and it's not a restaurant, a local tavern with recorded music. It's a nightclub.
Well, it's always curious when licensees are carrying proof around at random meetings in the community and giving things to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness, I do believe Detective Stravali left him a call-in letter, but it is interesting. I think, again, he's not an inexperienced, licensee, so.
And you
Right.
said his other location hasn't had any problems either?
One location had a late renewal violation years ago in 2013.
Okay, nothing
That
like
was it.
this though. All right.
Nothing like this.
Are the members ready to vote?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Fan?
Based on evidence presented by Counsel Marsico and Counsel Meyerhoff, it's clear that this licensee is not supervising and not following the method of operation as presented. There has been injuries and there's imminent threat to public health, safety, and welfare. I'm therefore voting to summarily suspend this license.
Commissioner Ford?
For all those reasons, plus obstructing of the investigation, the apparent availing, shots fired, unlicensed security, go on and on and on. This location to be a threat to the public health, safety, and welfare, and I vote to summarily suspend.
Chairman Bradley?
Based on council's presentation, it's clear that this licensee's become a threat to the public health, safety, and welfare, and I vote to summarily suspend.
So I have nothing else on today's calendar. Chairman, do you have anything?
No, nothing. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Adjourn.
Margarita. Thank you, members, and Donald, Tom, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.